Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of this resolution to disapprove the FCC's open Internet order. As we all know, the FCC wants to regulate the Internet. And why? Well, there must be some sort of market failure, right, that needs correcting, or some sort of Internet issue that needs fixing, or some out-of-control providers that need regulating. After all, why would you need the regulations? But that's not the case at all. In fact, we're talking about as one of the most successful sectors of our economy, one that's flourished with limited government regulation and continued to create jobs in the midst of a very deep recession and economic downturn. Now, since the Internet was privatized in the mid-1990s, it has prospered. The industry's growth and impact on our economy, as well as the development of new life-changing technologies and applications, is simply staggering. 20 years ago, the Internet, as we know it, did not even exist, and now over 2 billion people use it. 10 years ago, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Skype did not even exist, and now hundreds of millions of people around the world are users. 5 years ago, mobile applications did not exist, and at the end of last year, there were over 500,000 applications or apps, and over 10 billion will be downloaded this year. Hopefully, they'll be downloading mine, because we came up with an Office app yesterday for our office. 2 years ago, the iPad did not exist, and now over 25 million of them have been sold. All these advancements have expanded broadband access and encouraged private investment. For example, in 2003, only 15% of Americans had access to broadband, and now over 95% do. And this growth will only continue. In its annual report on the Internet, Cisco projects that the Internet will quadruple in size over the next 4 years. And the one-year growth from 2014 to 2015 will be equal to all the Internet traffic in the world last year. Clearly, the Internet industry is growing and innovating at lightning speed. And why has this industry been able to do this? Well, it's because the environment for innovation and job creation has been ripe, with government regulation not getting in their way. Imagine that. The government has stayed out. It's taken the light touch approach, and the industry has prospered as a result. The broadband expansion we've seen, the innovation that has occurred with the computers and tablets, the explosion of smartphones and mobile devices, and the increase in job creation all occurred. All of this has happened without the FCC's open Internet order. So why does the government want to start regulating now? Is it because the Internet endangers public health or the environment? Clearly not. Yet the proponents of Internet regulation claim that the freedom and growth of the Internet are in jeopardy. And quite frankly, it's my respectful opinion that that's ridiculous. To suggest that some type of regulation is needed flies in the face of the growth of the Internet economy. This is one of the problems facing our economy and plaguing our country. We are regulating where regulation is not needed. We are regulating based on speculation, and we are regulating in search of a problem. This is not how we encourage innovation. This is not how we create certainty in the marketplace, and this is definitely not how to encourage job creation. Over the past few weeks, all we have talked about is jobs, and rightfully so, because throughout America, the #1 issue facing Americans is jobs or the lack thereof. Yet here we are debating whether to overturn a regulation on one of the few growth areas of our economy, one of the few sectors that has and is creating good, high-paying jobs. This should be common sense, and it's just no wonder that people watching at home think that this place, that Washington, D.C., that the federal political process is out of touch and dysfunctional. Now, as the FCC has drafted the open Internet order, the Commission heard from broadband providers, including small businesses, about the problems the order would create and the negative impacts that it would have on consumers. One small Internet provider stated that the imposition of network management rules will hinder its ability to obtain investment capital and deploy new services in unserved areas. The regulations would also increase costs, and they would hamper innovation, which would only further discourage outside investment in the company. In other words, the Internet regulation that we're talking about here today, this regulation would lead to lower quality of services and would raise operating costs, which would result in higher prices on consumers. So we can clearly see the impacts of Internet regulation. Less investment, less innovation, higher prices for consumers, lower quality services, increased business costs, and ultimately fewer jobs. Companies will spend more money on compliance, on basically complying with these regulations, instead of investing it in innovation and driving down prices. More money will be spent on lawyers and not on engineers. Now, let me be clear, the Internet will still exist if Washington bureaucrats get their way on this. The Internet's still going to exist, but the order's impact will be profound. And it's going to disrupt what has been one of America's proudest entrepreneurial and industrial achievements in our history. Now, I've heard proponents say that this regulation will preserve the open internet as it exists today, but it is my humble opinion, respectfully, that this is short-sighted. Personally, I don't want to continue using the internet of today. I want the internet of tomorrow. I want the devices and the applications I use today to soon be obsolete and out of date, because the industry has continued to churn out something newer, something better and faster. I want technologies to continue to develop and industries to continue to emerge. We are now using fewer devices for more telecommunication services, and it's not hard to imagine a day when we will use one device for all of them. Now, the industries, that's where they're headed. That's the direction that the industries are headed. But when you throw the government in the middle of it, the pace will slow. Uncertainty will enter the marketplace. And future innovations, well, they may just go unrealized. One of the beautiful things about the internet industry is that we don't know what's around the corner in terms of new technologies and innovations. If a few years ago you would have told someone you Googled them, they probably would have been offended. But today we know that means something. So we, going forward, have no idea what the future holds, what the new innovations are going to be, what the new ideas, the new technologies. But we know that technologies that we cannot even imagine today will very soon be part of our everyday lives. And the question is whether we're going to encourage that, and particularly whether we're going to encourage that to happen here, or whether we're going to discourage that from happening. And regulating the internet, and this specific measure that we're trying today to knock down, if it passes, this specific measure will discourage that development. The FCC and the federal government cannot keep pace with the internet and the technology industries. And the government should not attempt to catch up through regulation or legislation. And that's an important point. We're asking this government, we're asking this bureaucratic structure, which struggles to keep pace with issues we've been facing for the last 20 years, to somehow keep pace with the issues and the technology and the innovations that arrive in an internet world. Not only do I think that's asking too much, I think it's impossible. Therefore, the government should not be looking at ways to preserve the status quo. What our government should be involved in is looking at ways to promote the future of these industries. And this internet regulation does not promote the future. Mr. President, I have previously spoken on this floor about the new American century, about whether our country will continue to be a leader in this new century. And I believe I do, with all the noise you hear and all the bad news every time you turn on the television, I believe with all my heart that there is no reason why this 21st century should not be every bit as much the American century as the last century was. And one of the reasons I believe that is because of the advances that our entrepreneurs, our innovators are making in this field of the internet. If there is one sector of our economy that will ensure that the next century is an American one, it is the internet and the technology sector. It's an industry where we are the leader, and it is the one where we must continue to lead. And to do that, we must encourage innovation, incentivize investment, provide certainty in the marketplace, and promote a competitive environment that this dynamic industry needs. And that will require a passage of this resolution of disapproval. And so I urge my colleagues to vote yes on the resolution. Mr. President, I yield the floor.